Hi, Kim. Welcome to my YouTube channel.
Thank
Yeah. I've known that I wanted to have a conversation with you personally in the context of spirituality and transcending oneself and healing our psychology, because that has been my path on YouTube. For some reason, part of my divine plan has been publicly sharing my process for the last almost 10 years. I've been
you.
doing this. Yeah, and a lot of my people that have been with me on my channel have been with me all that time. There's people, there are people that are like me and that feel this sense of that they're different, that they um, can't really connect or relate with modern society, but they do it because we're here in Western civilization and our culture, um, here in America, but all over. I connect with these people all over, and I think before coming into the teachings, I had this concept of being an indigo child or a star seed. Those names would pop up in that alt, new age jargon. And but then I found, the teachings, and I came across, what it is to be an avatar. And as soon as I heard that word, I knew exactly what you were talking about. I didn't need you, I
Mhm.
so that wasn't a surprise to me. But the way that you've been able to articulate, not just for me, but I know a lot of different people, the experience of what it's like to be here and why we're here. And I just wanted to ask, or just to talk about that a little bit more, and why yeah, why are we here?
Mm. Well, we're here because we were stupid enough to volunteer.
Exactly.
So there was probably more than one meeting, but the Ascended Masters were saying, we got this difficult planet called Earth. Is there anybody who wants to go? And we raised our hand and
Nick.
not fully understanding what we were getting into, I think, because I don't think you can understand, I don't think you can grasp it before you're here. So,
I was thinking about that, and like, in my contemplation, just going about my life, and I was like, what? Stop trying to save people. Like, this is I have a deep psychological background. I studied so much psychology before coming into the teachings. And so again, it's been like a fish to water. So I have a lot of background. I used healing developmental trauma models and internal family system models, which tie perfectly, in my understanding, tie perfectly into the what the masters and what you've talked about with separate selves, and these parts and these separate selves and where they come from and what their agenda is. But I love what the way the masters just dissect it and comb it out. It's not something, I don't want to digress and spend too much time on the internal family systems, but just to tie into psychology being intrinsically a part of the spiritual path and process. But I digress. Originally brought that up because right as I was coming into the teachings, I had found the drama triangle, which is, it's a triangle in psychology: the
okay.
victim, rescuer, perpetrator. And it's amazing how, when you step out of that triangle and what life reveals itself to be in our consciousness, and you can really step back even further from, yeah, the drama of life and the separate selves and all the hoopla, and just
Mm.
really witness it.
Yeah.
Mhm. I just started rereading
Okay.
my lives, and I I'm only I mean, I've read it before, but it was my first book that I came into the teachings with. This was the first
Okay. Yeah.
And I was listening to it. I had my phone read it to me.
Mm,
And so there was and it's been about a year since then. And so I decided to pick it back up because I've been getting this intuition and nudge um to read it again because it gives me that fulfillment of a novel, the
mhm,
storyline, and especially when Jesus is going through all of his, initiations with the main character. But I'm only so many like book notes, and I'm only like 27 pages in because I had to stop and go back and stop and reread it and reread it and read it. Some of these concepts and the layers in which reality is built upon and how we even come here.
mhm,
And the conscious you, I'm realizing more is what non duality teachers would call like just pure awareness.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, the way the way it's explained in the master's teachings, you have to always understand context because words are just words, right? So unless you have some kind of context, they have different meanings. So the way non-duality teachers use it, not the same that the masters use it when they talk about the conscious you, because the real meaning of the conscious you is that it is not the outer personality. So
Yeah.
that's why they say it's pure awareness or neutral awareness because it's beyond the outer personality. So that's not necessarily the way some non-duality teachers, because they are saying that the ultimate reality of Brahman is pure awareness, meaning undifferentiated.
Hmm.
So there's a difference there.
Hmm.
But the importance of, for me, the importance of the whole concept of conscious you is that before I had that concept, I was also studying many different spiritual teachings. I had many different mystical experiences since I was a child, basically. And I could never really grasp exactly what it is that happens when you have a mystical experience,
Hmm.
which part of you is having it. Because when I started understanding about ego, I realized that the ego can't have a mystical experience. So what is it that's having an experience?
Right.
And that's what was cleared up with the whole idea of the conscious you. It is only a concept they're giving us, but
Hmm.
I realized that there's a part of me that's more than the outer personality, more than the ego, we might say.
Hmm.
And that means that I can step outside of that outer personality and experience something. Instead of experiencing everything through my normal filter, I
Hmm.
experience pure awareness, basically, without any filter.
Hmm.
And that's also the magic of that concept is that it also makes it possible for you to look at anything in your psychology and to realize it's not you, it's not who you are.
Yeah.
And so if you see a certain tendency in your psychology, let's say a tendency to get irritated in certain situations, which we all have, right? So then you can go deeper and into it. You can realize it's not really you that's getting irritated. It's something, some structure, like you say, there's subconscious selves in your psychology, in your subconscious mind. And because it's not you, when you see it's not you, that's when you can let it go.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, when you talk about traditional psychological models, it's like, what's the basis for psychological healing? If all of this stuff is part of your personality, part of who you are.
And just to reiterate, the conscious you is pure awareness because it's an extension of our I am presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why.
So you can say, if you talk about many traditional teachings, including Advaita Vedanta and some non-dual teachings, they are talking about self-inquiry.
Mhm.
Who am I or what am I? And it often starts with realizing I am not that. So I'm not the physical body. I'm not my thoughts. And that's a valid approach. So you first have to sort of disidentify yourself with the outer personality, even your deepest sense of identity, because a lot of the identity we have taken on in this lifetime and over many lifetimes is we are human beings on Earth. We grew up in a certain country, a certain family, uh, white, black, yellow, whatever, characteristics we had. But we have to disassociate from that and realize we're more than this, because that's how we can basically grow spiritually, by overcoming our attachments to all of this, to the way we look at life. This is what the Buddha talked about, overcoming attachments. But what I see is that some people, it's like they stop there. They realize they're not the outer personality, but they don't look up and say, what am I then?
Mhm.
Because the conscious you, yes, it is pure awareness, but it is, as you said, an extension of the I am presence, and the I am present has a distinct individuality.
Mhm.
But we can connect to that individuality, our spiritual individuality, as long as we are identified with the worldly individuality that we have
Mhm.
created over many lifetimes.
Mhm.
So that's why the first step is to say, I am not that, but then what am I?
Mhm.
And then you look up and you see the I am presence from a distance. Gradually, you start connecting to it, and eventually the connection becomes just a oneness with it.
Mhm. You know, that divine individuality, since I've gone through many layers in my life, and especially with the teachings, has been exponential growth. Once I committed, I had a lot of distractions that I was still feeding, but it's been about, I guess time isn't relevant, but I've had exponential growth and dissolving the layers of illusion of who I am and my identity. Like
Mhm.
when I first came into the teachings, there was a lot of, what do you call it in the book? The pen?
Oh yeah,
What is the pen?
and programmed illusion of normality,
Yeah.
PIN.
Yeah. So I didn't have, I've been way out for a long time. So it didn't, it wasn't that I was totally shocked by some things, but some things did get to me a little bit. But it was more so the teachings that have been deprogramming my mind in certain ways. And I just started to realize like how neutral and not in a linear mind sense logical, but how useful and valid and practical the advice the masters give, and it's really helped me become to change more into that neutrality, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like instead of this extreme, I feel like I was constantly in and out of crisis, like
Mhm.
internally, you know.
Right.
I come from 12-step background. I was involved in that for a little while because but my a lot of my extremes came from obviously separate selves and thought forms, but I would act out emotionally and through relationships. I didn't have substance issues, but I abused technology, or I would abuse food, or I would abuse sex and love, and, all the things that keep us grasping, you know,
Mhm.
for something. Yeah, it's just been a profound
Well,
journey.
what I would say to this is that whatever you have done in your life has prepared you to find the teachings and make use of them. And because most people I have met on the spiritual path, they have gone not exactly the same as you, but they have gone through a lot of different steps to be where they are today, wherever they're at. And I used to think when I was young, that my first spiritual movement I found when I was 18, it was transcendental meditation. After some years, I got disappointed with it. And I thought, oh, it was a mistake. I should never have got into this. But
Mhm,
I don't look at it that way anymore, because I see this was just part of my personal path. And
mhm,
we have the concept that we each have a life plan that we make before we come into this embodiment. And we make it in cooperation with the ascended masters we are working with personally. And we plot out these steps. So there just comes a point where you have to look at your life and say, well, whatever I went through, that was what I had to go through.
yeah.
And many people like you see, I grew up in a family in Denmark. Everybody was born in this little town. and they all live there still. I'm the only one who really moved away. My sister moved away. She moved 15 kilometers away from us in town. So, but what I'm saying is, when you look at what they have gone through, what kind of growth they have had in a lifetime, it's not that much. But many spiritual people, because we really want to make progress, we are going towards that. We try this, we try that, we go from one extreme to the other. And you can look at it and say, well, people aren't necessarily balanced. And I think one of the big issues for spiritual people is that many people are not balanced. But after some time of going back and forth, most people usually find a certain personal balance where
Mhm.
you can be a little more on an even keel and go instead of going towards the extremes.
Mhm.
So I just think you have to at some point look back at your past and not
Mm.
have any regrets, because you had to go through it. You had to have those experiences because, it's again, this the spiritual path. You cannot approach it as a theoretical intellectual study.
Mhm.
I have met people on the path who knew certain teachings by heart. They could recite this or that teaching, but they never really changed. And so it can't be intellectual. You have to have a certain amount of experiences,
Mm.
because it's often the experiences that shift your consciousness.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's an unpleasant experience because you
Mm.
realize, I can't do this anymore. I can't go to these extremes. But still, if it shifts your consciousness, it did what it was meant to do.
Mm.
So it's like you could say, you know, let's say your life has a span like this. There are two extremes, but you are following a path. And sometimes you go that way, and sometimes you go that way. But when you find balance, you're staying more in the center and therefore faster
Mhm.
progress. You
Mhm.
don't take the big swings, but still, at a certain point, the swings are necessary
Yeah.
because you need to have that experience.
Can we talk about that? Because I know that you've done a lot of traveling in your life and it involved uprooting your entire family and coming to America and being here in the States for a while and then moving around and then going eventually back to Denmark. But I know you've lived in other countries other than
Yeah, I
Denmark.
lived in Estonia for 5 years and Sweden for a short time.
Right. So tell me about that because, I had listened to your video, Why Balance is Essential. And you had talked about that being a part of your divine plan. It wasn't balanced, but it was a part of your divine plan.
Hmm.
And so, I have my own personal stuff that I've been looping in for some time around living situations um and I've had this intuition or sense. I've been feeling into it for a while, but how, how do we sometimes I guess it's a part of our divine plan to have experiences and it not necessarily be balanced for us to learn something. And so, how was that process for you? How do you look back at that? I mean, I know you just kind of said it already, but yeah, how do you, I guess that discernment and decision making process is just something that kind of happens because you're just following something.
Yeah, you follow your intuition.
Yeah.
You can always look back, and I can look back at my own life and see I wasn't balanced in many situations. And in a sense, you could say I was more extreme
Mm.
uh, compared to my family, for example, who live a normal, quote unquote, life. And but but I followed my intuition. But what I
Mhm.
can also see is that my own reaction to it was not as balanced as it could have been, obviously. But then again, you could say, because I did what I did, I mean, I can definitely look back and say, because I left Denmark and moved to the United States, I made much faster progress than I would have had
Mhm.
if I'd stayed in Denmark.
Mhm.
In fact, the Buddha has a saying that he talks about you need to accomplish the Dharma in a lifetime. And he says that moving away from your home country is accomplishing half the Dharma. And I don't think you need to take that literally and say everybody needs to move away from their home country. But what he meant was that you have grown up taking so many things for granted that you never look at them. But when you move to another country, you get a whole different perspective on it. But you can still get that same perspective by staying in your home country. You just have to make an effort to
Mhm.
see, you know, the way your family looks at life. Is that really like my family, for example? They grew up in this factory town. They were all workers. I was the first person in my family to get a high school education, um, and so their mindset was, you get a job,
Mhm.
you buy a house, and
Again.
you live your whole life that way.
Mhm.
And they couldn't think of starting a business, for example. It
Mm.
was just not in their whole mindset. You would start your own business. They were workers. You work, you get a job. And these are the kind of things that you can come to look at from your background and question that. And there are many others, of course, their whole attitude to life. They're not spiritual whatsoever, my family. They're not religious either. I obviously was because I had questions that couldn't be answered and I needed answers to them.
It's interesting that you say that about the things that you take for granted with what the Buddha was saying, because I had made a decision to think about traveling or even moving to a different country to Europe. I've been getting this intuition for a while. So from making that choice, it's like my consciousness attunes to all the things that I would take for granted. And I think it had stopped me in the past. My reaction, I love what you brought up about your reaction wasn't balanced to certain things because I'm realizing personally, once I made that decision, yeah, my consciousness is almost looking back in hindsight as if I'm already there
Mhm.
in the other country and looking back at just how comfortable and pleasant it is to go everywhere and know everyone. And also, I'm a very open, abstract, eccentric person. I'm just a very open person, and so I started to realize that going to a different country will be very different.
Yeah, I mean, moving to Europe, for example, isn't that simple legally, but you could move to another part of the US. I mean, the
Hmm.
US has so many different regions. It's almost like moving to another country.
Hmm.
Um, California, for example, would be very different from the East Coast and
Hmm.
many other places. I mean, I first moved to Montana, which is like a whole other country. So, if you doubt that, watch that TV series on Netflix called Yellowstone. Yeah, they said if your great grandparents weren't born in Montana, you're not a native Montana. Of course, there are some Native Americans who would dispute that. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I'm just saying, I had to go through a lot of legal problems getting legal status in the U.S. That's part of what I can see wasn't balanced, but I can also look back and say, okay, well, I had to go through that because I needed to be there. I needed to be in the US for a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
Uh, and in a sense, sometimes I look back at this because I moved to the US in 1987 and I had 4 or 5 very turbulent years where I had to do all kinds of work. I was
Hmm.
going door to door selling wildlife prints. I was a salesman, sold windows and siding, and I had mobile homes, and I did all kinds of jobs just to survive. And so, but I can look back at that, and what came to me one time was that this is what the Buddhists call ego pummeling,
Hmm.
and there is no point in analyzing should I have done this, should I have done that, should this have happened, should that have happened. It was just ego pummeling because I needed to get over this, as you said, so many things you take for granted when you grow up.
Hmm.
And I actually realized at some point, I realized that I have been given a blank slate because instead of being who I was brought up to be, I can be whoever I want.
Yeah.
Nobody knows me.
Yeah. I'm just really desiring to travel more than to move to Europe, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, because it's simpler. Um, so tell me more about who started doing this work in 2002.
Hmm.
And so have you had these websites since then?
Yeah. Ask Will Jesus, and it's
Yeah.
still up.
Yeah. That wasn't. I mean, I know the dot-com boom happened, but that was not to have your own business, for it to be online, that was not even, I know for your culture, not even heard of, but I think in general is a very, very niche, very unique, kind of trailblazing endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, from a traditional standpoint, it's crazy. I
Right.
mean, I had a comfortable job as a technical writer, and I just gave that up and started to make a living off of the website where I just had a few books I was selling. I was doing a couple of conferences, and I don't know how I survived those first years, but I mean, there was enough money coming in that I could survive on it, and it's been that way ever since. So, but I mean, it's not really a business, it's something I do. That's my work to help other people.
Mhm.
And I just need to make enough money to have a roof over my head and a computer, and so I
Mhm.
can keep doing my work. That's how I look at it. I don't look at it as a way to make money, because I could have made a lot more money if I had tried to, but that's never been my goal.
Mhm. Yeah, it's your work. It's your what you're here to do.
It's my passion. It's my gift. It's my whatever you want to call it. But yeah, but it is kind of amazing, and it is, it's not the .com, but it was in. I started when the internet was kind of new,
Mhm.
and not many people were doing websites, and there wasn't nearly as much material on the internet. So it was actually easier for people to find the website than it is today, where
Mhm.
there's so much more. But yeah, it's kind of unique. I just look at it that I enjoy doing the work, and if I make enough money to make a living, then that's good. Then I just continue doing it. Um, but whether it's a model that others can copy, that's another matter.
Mhm.
You know?
I was gonna say, I've always felt like this intuition that I would be supported by the work that I do, which is to share myself and give whatever offerings that I have, support, guidance that I have. I have a lot of background with embodiment work and, with the master's teachings, I just feel so devoted. I feel so devoted to these teachings and getting them out there. And so I wanted to say, like, why? Well, I have two places where we can go. Why would someone, why, I was going to say should, but there's no shoulds. Why would people want, why would people that watch my videos want to study these teachings? I have my answer, but why? How could we explain what these teachings are? Because I feel like with my personality, I guess, when I get into something, I just go all in and I just start to tell people what I'm learning, but I don't, it's not a linear thing. I don't like, oh, and now, start from the beginning. This is what we're doing. And I just explain how it's affecting my life and how awesome it is. And my synthesis of it. So how, what are these teachings?
Yeah, what are they? They're so multifaceted, but a lot of people that I've watched over the many years I've been on the path, you really grow up having all these questions, and you're looking for answers. You don't find them in traditional churches. You don't find them in scientific materialism. So most people find a spiritual movement that has some teachings, and it gives them answers for a time. But then uh, most people, after a while, they need a higher teaching. They're ready for a higher teaching. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to find the Ascended Master's teachings, but many people do. And it's partly because they give answers, but it's also because people intuitively feel a connection to the masters. See, I'm just a messenger. I'm just sort of the one who takes these teachings. But what people really need to do is discover their own intuitive connection to the masters,
Mhm.
and the love they have for the masters, the love the masters have for them. Because that's what drives it. It's always driven me. I mean, when I first heard about Ascended Masters, it seemed obvious to me.
Mhm.
What really seemed obvious was I came from the background. I've been in this transcendental meditation movement, which was uh, a typical example of Eastern teachings brought to the West. which has happened, many Eastern teachings that have come to the West. And it was also a movement that had a particular guru who was like the all-knowing guru. But he had some human idiosyncrasies. I mean, he was from India and he had grown up in a certain culture. And now he came to the West, and the women wore saris and the men wore suit and tie. And, so that was just one example of many. But so what I felt was that I was ready for a kind of spiritual teacher that didn't have any human
Mhm.
idiosyncrasies. And I'm not using that to criticize. I'm just saying I was just ready for a higher form of spiritual teacher.
Mhm.
And I realized what ascended masters are, that they have ascended because they have let go of all the human baggage. I realized this is what I'd always wanted in a teacher. And I think people need to go through that on their own and feel whether it's something for them. I don't think you can talk people into it. I don't think you can argue. It's something people need to feel. I always look at it that I'm very, and I always have been, very, very respectful of people's free will. So
Mhm.
I would never even dream of trying to talk people into or convert them to a teaching. They just have to feel themselves in their with their intuition whether it's something for them. They can't do anything else really. Um,
Well, bless you because I haven't. I'm totally been like codependency, trying to change people, trying to get them to do something, and I'm too exhausted by it. And I see the ramifications. I see the karmic return on something like that. It's just not worth it.
well, I was young and enthusiastic once too,
Yeah.
So I also dreamt of, I wasn't really so active doing it because I lived in Montana for 10 years where there were so many people. I only met people who were in Ascended Master teachings. I dreamt of doing it and finding ways to do it and writing a best-selling book and this and that.
Mhm.
But I just let go of it because um, you just have to be yourself. That's all you can
Mhm.
do. So, but I think we all have to go through that phase. And I actually think it has to do with what we mentioned briefly in the beginning, why we came to Earth in the first place.
Mhm.
Because we feel like we're here to help people. We're here to improve the Earth, leave it in a better place than when we came. So we would like to have some outer visible proof that our being here has made a difference. That was a very important motivating factor for me for many years.
Mhm.
That I wanted to feel like it, because let's put it this way. I wasn't here because there was something on Earth that I wanted to do or experience.
Mm.
A life on Earth really isn't enjoyable for me in an ultimate sense.
Not-
I'm not saying I'm not enjoying life, that I don't have activities I enjoy, but I'm just saying I didn't come here to experience whatever you experience on Earth. So I came here, I won't say it was necessarily a sacrifice, but I came here as a kind of work I took on. It's a task I took on. And I think many spiritual people feel that way, certainly many people I've met. Um, and therefore, we would like to feel that we have done something that was worthwhile, that made a difference. And that's why we can sometimes get into this wanting to convert other people. I mean, you see it in so many spiritual movements that people who are going to come in, they become very enthusiastic. And you could probably find 50 spiritual movements out there who all think they alone are saving the earth.
Mm.
And that the only way to save the earth is to convert as many people as possible to follow their specific movement. And my view is they're all making a contribution. Over time, I have sort of grown out of this desire because I realized that all you can do is be yourself and express that. And if people see that you have some kind of peace of mind or something that they want, then they'll ask. And if they don't, well, you know, not much you can do about it.
Yeah, it's been a sort of mantra in my head. I'm just here to be myself and express myself, and I think that's a part of yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's why we're here. And
But the
my
trick is, of course, that what is yourself? Is it the outer personality, like we talked about, or do you need to disidentify from that and then connect to your I am presence, because that's yourself, that's your
Yeah.
divine individuality. And then we are here to just express that.
So how would we do that? How do we discern?
Um, I think, yeah, I understand your question, but I
Mhm.
think we don't try to discern. We simply use the process, whatever process works for us, to disidentify from the outer personality, to dissolve that outer personality.
Mhm.
And then we seek to connect to the I am presence. And then it just is expressed through us. It's kind of like, I was in an organization for a number of years that called the Summit Lighthouse, which had a set of master teachings. They
Mm.
didn't talk about the conscious you, but they talk about the I am presence.
Mhm.
And they had a physical picture, a chart of your I am presence, where at the bottom was the figure that represented you. Then there was
Mhm.
this tube of light, and on up high was your I am presence, which had colored rings around it. And
I'm gonna go get it. I know what you're talking
okay,
about. This is what he's speaking about.
yeah. So the lower figure represents you, and the upper figure represents your I am presence. What you have there is actually, I think, from the I am movement, because the Summit Lighthouse had a figure in the middle that was the Christ self
Right. This is from the
in the I am movement. Yeah. Anyway, but it's very similar. So what I want to say with that is that it was useful for me for a time to have that concept.
Mhm.
But I realized at some point that it also had a limitation, because you saw the I am presence as being way up there.
Mhm.
So, and this is what you have to do in the beginning. As I said, you have to disidentify from the outer personality and then eventually connect. And in the beginning, you will see the I am presence, you will experience it as being up there. But as you begin to expand your connection, you stop seeing the I am presence as outside yourself. You really stop trying to figure out what it's like,
Yeah.
because when it comes right down to it, it's exactly the same as you cannot step out physically outside of your body and look yourself in the eye. And it's the same thing, really. Your I am presence is not separate from you. You're an extension of it. So
Mhm.
as long as you have this mental image in your mind that your I am presence is some being up there, you can't really unite with it. So how to discover the individuality of your I am presence is allow it to be expressed through you.
Mhm.
It's like you have many of these spiritual teachers talk about consciousness. What is consciousness and this and that. And what came to me one day, I was thinking about this, is that consciousness is that which allows you to study objects, but it cannot itself become an object of study.
Mhm.
So in other words, don't try to step back and study your I am presence from a distance. You need to actually step outside of that mind that wants to understand everything and
Mhm.
find it and grasp it and discern. And you just need to. I think what you can do is you can once you have some sense of connection, once you've experienced that there are some times where you feel there's a flow through you,
Mhm.
then this is your uh, frame of reference. Do you feel the flow or don't you? And if you don't feel the flow, you just do whatever you need to do to reconnect to the flow and let it flow through you. You can't analyze. I mean, there can be a time where you need to look at your psychology and analyze what's going on in the outer mind. That's valid enough. But you can't analyze, is it your I am presence or not? And that's why I'm saying it's almost better not to try to discern, but
Mhm.
just try to connect and let it be expressed.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been noticing when you mentioned the outer personality and me just being myself, I've been watching how I have certain separate selves or a self that when I'm nervous or I'm feeling anxious or anticipating someone's reaction, I have like people phobia sometimes.
Mhm.
um, and I notice I've become this more eccentric, like I'm trying to cope with my uncomfortable feelings. And I think that's a hallmark of a lot of comedians that have been through a lot of stuff. Like the funniest people have been through the most tragedy. And I
Yeah.
have found, I think I'm funny, and my outer personality is amusing to me. Um, I notice this self that has like intimacy phobia. I love people and I love connecting with people, and I can get really deep, but at a certain point, I don't know if it's a certain amount of time that goes by or just I start to internally freak out a little bit.
Hmm.
And I think that's tied up with some trauma and some probably things obviously from past lifetimes and this lifetime. My lifetime was so rich that it wouldn't, if I never found the teachings, I would still have so much that I think resonates with certain separate selves that I have. But it feels like this lifetime was a mirror of all the past lifetimes that I've had that gained the separate selves that I have, like, very tumultuous,
Yeah. But
in
I think
upbringing.
I think in a way what you're talking about is something that a lot of spiritual people have. I mean, I can certainly see it in myself also. And I think, what comes right down to it, um, nothing is more precious to you than your connection to your I am presence,
Mhm.
because this is who you are. And when people over many past lifetimes have reached that level, they're ready to connect to the spiritual self, then everything else is just circumstantial.
Mhm.
And what you see a lot in the world, especially in relationships, is that um, people talk about love, but it's really ownership. It's possessive
Mhm.
love. So you see people, for example, and I see many spiritual people who have this. They have a love relationship, and their partner feels, "Oh, you're not giving me enough attention. You don't love me
Mhm.
enough. You're not putting me first." I have a son that was born when I was 20, so he's in his 40s now.
Mhm.
And he once told me, um, Dad, I always felt that your personal quest for enlightenment was more important to you than anything else.
Yes, you're right,
Between the
son.
lines saying, more important than me. And I actually looked him straight in the eye and I said, "You're absolutely right." And he was offended by that. He basically hasn't talked to me since. But what I'm saying is, this is how spiritual people feel when you reach a certain level. Nothing is more important to you than your inner connection to your higher self or to the ascended masters. And all other people are kind of on the periphery of that. But this doesn't mean that we don't love people and we don't care about them. It's just that we have a certain priority. But there's another aspect of this, and that is that what I talked about. For many people, love is possessive. Well, for
Mm.
me, it wasn't possessive because I knew, even as a child, I cannot own another human being.
Mm.
See, and if it had been the case, as my son seemed to want, that I had put him before anything else in my life, that would have been possessive love. And I would have demanded something from him in return, which
Mm.
he might not have been willing to live up to because he's a child and there comes a point where he should live his own life. And I'm not
Mm.
part of it. This is, you see, you can't let go of the children. So what
Mhm.
I'm saying is, as spiritual people, because we have the priorities we have, we're not seeking to own other people. And therefore, we can't put them before our inner connection to our
Mm.
higher self. They go together. We have our inner priorities straight. And it's not that we can't love and care for other people, but there is just something that is more important than anything outside of ourselves.
Well, I think I'm at that stage because I think I've been in denial of that because the projection of being a mother has been so intense on me, especially with the upbringing that I had. I was so intent about doing things different. And, I'm at this point in the last week or two where I've noticed this incredible tension that's been building with me and my son, who's 5. But there's this tension because, and I realized it wasn't something to bypass, because I realized I was putting so much attention on him and this kind of possessive love, because I was projecting things from my past onto him in our relationship. And, I had done that in so many of my relationships. And I think that's why they were so tumultuous, is because I was demanding from them, each and
Mhm.
every one of them, the love that I was subconsciously trying to get from them, that I can only get from my own presence and
Yeah, yeah,
from source.
yeah.
And I just, this, I mean, this is just now the aha moment from what you just shared, because I, and what to do with that, as a parent. I'm like, okay, you take care of the child, you take care of your responsibilities, but
Well, I
what
would say what to do is you need to look at your upbringing. And as you said, what you were intent on, I assume you had a dysfunctional upbringing and you were intent on doing better as a mother. What
Mhm.
is your model for doing better? What's your mental image of that? And in a sense, you could say, um, what what chains have you put yourself in with that attitude that are keeping you trapped, and therefore also keeping your son trapped because you're projecting certain expectations upon him.
Yeah.
And this is what you see a lot in parent-children relationships.
Mhm.
Each side has expectations and they're demanding something from the other that the other can't live up to. And I think, if you could look at it in yourself and overcome these restraints you put on yourself, you could be more free to be yourself in the relationship. Because what you can't do right now is be yourself.
Yeah.
So you're growing on the spiritual path, you're becoming more and more yourself, but in relation to your son, you are still restrained. And
Yeah.
as often it is with all kinds of relationships.
Yeah.
Could also be love relationships or parents or whatever, because they are holding a certain image of us. And so if you can look at that, look at those selves, free yourself from this and say, well, regardless of, let's put it this way, you had a certain upbringing
Mhm.
that gave you a certain mental image of your parents
Mhm.
and how you shouldn't be a parent. And you have created an image of how you should be a parent that is in opposition to or in relation to that image. You see what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
You had one image, and now you have created another image that is almost opposite, or at least very different from it. But you may not fit in either of those extremes,
Yeah.
right? You may have your own way of being a parent that you haven't discovered yet because you're holding yourself to that image. And that means you are not free in your relationship with your son, which means you can't set him free to be who he is because you're projecting on him. In a sense, you're saying, I want to fulfill my image of what it means to be a good mother, and my son has to live up to that image so that he validates that I'm a good mother.
Yeah, I think my son has been rejecting it. He's just like, what do he's been, you know, rejecting what it is that I'm projecting onto him. Thank God.
Mhm.
Because I'm listening. It's not just because he's 5. I'm so tired of the world and their stereotypes. It's like, no, my child is trying to. Tell me something. And it's not even my child, even then, like that word, like that,
Mm.
my child. No.
If you had a difficult childhood,
Mhm.
then, and I've seen this happen with, I guess, all of us, because we all have this tendency. We have this fear we could fail as a parent,
Mhm.
especially if we had parents that we thought failed. We were saying, I don't want to fail.
Mhm.
But the only way to not fail as a parent is to be yourself. Not the outer personality, but as I said, your inner individuality that we talked about. You, let's put it this way. There's a lot of models in the world about how parents should be. But when it comes right down to it, you are a unique individual and you have a right to be yourself. And being yourself with your child is good enough. That's the way it's meant to be. You can't be anything else. And even if you're not, haven't resolved all your psychology right now, you still have a right to be who you are. You can't be anything else. But if you're trying to impose some image upon yourself and force yourself into it, you're making both yourself and your child unhappy.
And we don't know these things until we just figure it out in the school of hard knocks, you know? It's just how many knocks would I be getting, you know, with this and the
Yeah.
suffering. And I just didn't, you know, thank God that I've been, you know, it's interesting actually. I started to pay attention to the words that I would choose to say to him. And I started to notice this pattern where I would get upset, I would get triggered, and I would react. And there's like a theme of phrases I would say that were repetitive. And one of them was, "You don't listen. You're not listening to me." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh, I think I'm not listening to me."
Yeah, you're not listening to yourself, probably. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I really enjoy walking this path because the things that were once such a big deal, they're really not. And it just relieves so much pressure. Like lately, I've been realizing, and thanks to my friend Neptune, our mutual friend, like the tears, even the emotion that comes from me crying is like letting off the literal steam from the
Mm.
pressure that's been
Yeah, of
internal.
course.
This
Yeah.
internal pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just healthy.
It is so healthy.
Um, no, but I mean, I'm reminded of what the masters have said. The masters have said several times, there's only one thing that the dark forces had to do to screw things up on this planet. You remember what it was? They had to project that there's a standard for right and wrong that we have to live up to.
Oh, I know. I know. I know.
So there's a standard for what it means to be a mother that you have to live up to, because if you don't, you're a complete failure. And all of a sudden, being a mother is now, it's a high risk business, where you could fail. And think about the irony of this. You have free will, but so does your son. So this means that the only way you could avoid failing is to control your son's free will so he always did what you wanted him to do, so that you look like a good mother, right? And I know this because I met several people, including my wife, who has a mother like that.
Mm.
That you, their child, you have to live up to this image that they have created of what, so that they can seem like the perfect mother. But you can't control your son's behavior, right?
Mm-mm.
So you're setting yourself up to fail because your success or failure will depend on the choices of another person with free will who has a totally different personality than you.
This is
So that's
blowing my mind.
So that's why I'm saying you have to look at these expectations. You have straitjacket. You ever watched any videos with Houdini?
Mm.
You know who he was, right? The escape
Mm.
artist.
Mm.
So they put a straitjacket on him. They wrap him in chains with locks. They put him inside a small chest and they throw him in the water. And he has to get out. Well, we are like that because we have put ourselves in this and now we are trying to escape.
Thanks to the projections and the standards that have been
Yes, just because there's a standard for how you're supposed to be as a human being, because otherwise God isn't going to let you into heaven. He's going to send you to hell.
Oh my God. So the relationship that I had been in and out of very, very unhealthy relationship. Then it lasted longer than any other relationship I had been besides my son's father. That it was like a perfect mirror of the things that I was not aware of in myself. But there was so much standards being placed upon me as a parent that were
Mhm.
reflected in that person. They were just hyper vigilant around being a good parent or not. Because
Mhm.
funnily enough, we were both abused as children, and it was very, it was just comical when you look back now that I didn't.
Mhm.
I took that on because I would let the shame and the blame, you know, you, there was so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. But that's where you have to look at what the masters have also said. We are here on earth basically to demonstrate that there's a way out of all of this stuff.
Mhm,
And how do we demonstrate it? How do you demonstrate that somebody can get free from the chains? Well, you
mhm.
have to put on the chains, right? You can't just stand there theoretically and tell other people, you should do this and you should do that. You demonstrate, hey, I took this on, I had this, but now I freed myself from it. Then it has a whole different impact on people than if you're just standing there like the academic who has studied this in college and written a book, a self-help book, and now knows everything. You know what I mean? It's through us taking this stuff on and being free of it that we can show other people they can be free of it too.
So this is really interesting because all the things I just said this to my mother the other day because I spent the holidays with her and I was estranged from her from most of my childhood after I think it was around 8 to 16. She was completely out of my life, no contact. And, I was spending time with her and I just said this out loud because I hadn't realized it. It was like everything that I had ever analyzed or judged, I ended up taking it on and being deeply humbled by the experience. Like every single thing, every judgment around parenting, I never thought I would become the mother that I had become.
Mhm.
I, you know, the ways, I mean, the littlest things that I had judgments or opinions about, I would then take it on. It was almost like it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I didn't know I was judging them. I was just living my life as a young person, just be like, oh, yeah, whatever. I'm not doing that. Yeah. How did they not see this? How do people not see how this is trapping them and blah, blah, blah? And then I would take it on. And then,
Yeah, I mean this is just a common experience for all of us.
mhm,
When you think about it, it took me a long time to see why that is, and it's actually Jesus said, "Judge not, that ye be not judged."
mm,
Because with whatever measure you meter out, it should be metered out to you. But the deeper reason for this, which you're never going to discover by doing a literal interpretation of the Bible, is that when you are judging other people, it's because you have a subconscious self based on that form of judgment. And the thing is, that subconscious self may be looking out and judging other people. And you may be aware of that. You are consciously aware that, you know, you are judging these people. But the subconscious self is also looking in, judging you. So by so really, the way you are judging other people is the way to discover how you're judging yourself. And then see that this comes from this separate self, which is completely unreal, which is based on some illusion you took on. And therefore, you can say to this subconscious self, I don't want you in my life anymore. I don't want to go around judging myself or other people this way. I want to be free of this.
I'm having a breakthrough, Kim, with this parenting thing. Okay. So I was alienated from my mother. She was she was forcibly pushed out of my life. That's the narrative. No one will ever know, but that is what happened.
Mhm.
And there was a tumultuous, thing. There was a lot of conflict between her and my father. And she was away a lot, I think
Mhm.
if not physically, consciously.
Mhm.
And I think I created a self And because she had a lot of emotional issues and addiction stuff, and so it wasn't just it was just that's how things were. But okay, I created a self that would be have this tension and mental image of what I would be as a mother as a counteract to that. So from one extreme to the other,
Mhm.
because I think if I didn't do everything right, I would be alienated from my son. And it was recreating this fear subconsciously of abandonment because
Mhm.
that was the wound, I was
Right.
abandoned. That was even the narrative I kept hearing growing up from my dad. Like, she abandoned you, she abandoned you, she abandoned you over and over again.
Mhm.
And so I realized yeah, I've had this PTSD self that's like, no, I have to save, I've got to get on that drama triangle and rescue and save my son and make somebody the enemy like his father, you
Mhm.
know, so I can save him, so I can be the hero
Mhm.
and be the mom that I never had because she was pushed away. And so everyone will be happy and everything will be great. And that's the savior. I'm the savior.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Right?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. But you see, again, if you're taking on that role as the savior, you're putting yourself in the straitjacket and in the chains and in a little box, and you're throwing yourself at the bottom of the harbor.
Quite literally. I
Yeah.
literally am in a tiny box, my
Yeah,
tiny
yeah.
house that I
Yeah, yeah.
have forcibly kept myself in because I wanted to be comfortable and have a life, and but it was a straitjacket, and I was like, I can't keep
Mhm.
living like this. I can't live like the way that my community is living, which everyone has their homes, and everyone's homesteading, and it's just this culture here of this perfect, alternative American life. A lot of people that I'm surrounded by are very alternative. I mean,
Mhm.
I live in one of the most alternative places in the country, in Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, but I needed to come here and I needed to do that and to see because
Yeah.
I'm
And
mom.
an experience you needed. But it's
Oh,
also a little box,
it's a
and
book.
it's alternative box. It's
Literally.
it's you grew up in a certain box. And then in order to get away from that box, you went for the alternative, but it's just another box.
It's a death chamber rattling around in here.
Yeah.
I just have to say, because I feel like I've always been so deeply connected to my presence. We have our moments where we lose sight of that and we can disconnect and get into the drama. But right after I birthed my son, and I'm talking maybe hours because I birthed my son not in this house, but in my home at the time. And I had this brain journal that I was going to use for it. And the first thing I wrote and I doodled was unconventional mothering.
Hmm.
And I felt like the message with that was like I would be my authentic self somehow and still have the responsibility of like caretaking the child. But I feel like I'm having a full circle moment of like
Hmm.
what you're saying. It's like you can only ever be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, take that a little step further. We're talking about avatars. And so I don't know if the people watching this know this, but the idea is that we came to Earth from another planet that was a
Mm.
natural planet where you didn't have the murder and mayhem you have on Earth.
Mhm.
And as we came into embodiment here, we were very, very shocked by conditions here. So we see basically a birth trauma of coming to Earth. And the message we got was there's something wrong with you. You're not good enough. You shouldn't have come here. But in order to make it here, you have to turn yourself into a different person and live up to the standard for right and wrong that's here on Earth.
Mm,
So a lot of us have over many lifetimes been, first we are trying to adapt to the standard, and we realize it didn't get us anywhere. And now we are at the point where we need to look at the standard and say, I'm going to stop trying to fit myself into this box. I'm just going to be myself because I have a right to be myself. And there is nothing wrong with me. I mean, I had a period, that was probably 20 years ago, but I had a period where for several years, whenever thoughts came to me, I did something wrong or I wasn't adequate, my mantra would be, there is nothing wrong with me. And I just kept repeating this. This was before I had the concept of the separate selves. Today, I would have been able to deal with it more better by looking at the self that was projecting at me that there was something wrong with me. But back then, I just kept repeating this. There's nothing wrong with me.
mm.
This is just a complete lie that has been put on us here on earth, that there's something wrong with us if we don't live up to this outer standard.
Yeah, I'm honestly been thinking as you've been talking, how once we break out of something, a pen, a standard that's been
Mhm.
so entrained inside of our brain and our mind and these separate selves, it's almost like that image. I don't know the image of it or the name of the image, but it's that very colorful one that was made probably in the 1800s where the man is peering out of the firmament. Do you know what I'm talking about? The starry firmament one?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yes.
something outside, and so I'm wondering, like, how do I be? How do I relate? Be for example, what we just talked about, beyond this separate self that I've been operating in around parenting that has been a chokehold on my psyche, with my like, how do I even it's like learning how to walk. At least that's the image that comes in my mind,
Mhm.
learning how to walk again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think you start by looking at it.
Mhm.
Um, um, I don't know if you are old enough to remember the Star Wars movies.
Yes.
Okay, so there's this situation where Luke Skywalker is being trained by Yoda to be a Jedi.
Yes, sir.
And Yoda says, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's what we had. That's where we start. We start by looking at what did we learn on how to be. And then we unlearn that so we can be free of it. So our minds are free of it. I mean, you could look at the sky, the Star Wars movies as a Jedi Knight is one who is open to the Force, right? But most people have in their minds, they have closed themselves off from the Force. And that's why we have to, again, open our minds so the impressions can flow through us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically, you don't have to figure out how to be a parent. You just have to stop. You have to free yourself from all the ideas of how you should be and then just let it flow by being yourself. I mean, I had this situation where my first wife and I, we had two sons. They were quite young when we moved to America.
Mhm.
And it was, we ended up getting divorced. It was kind of hard on the children. And when they became adults, um, my children were kind of blaming my spiritual uh, quest and the Summit Lighthouse, the organization I was in, for everything that had gone wrong in their lives. And that I was a spiritual parent, or my first wife also, but they were sort of blaming this. And my thought was always, why did you choose us as parents? Why didn't you choose some perfectly normal parents in Denmark that lived like my family and never moved out of their hometown?
Wow.
And it's the same thing. You could say, why did your son choose you as a mother?
Mm.
Because he wanted you as you are, not what you're trying to make yourself into being to fit the standard, but he wanted you for who you are. And that's good enough. I mean, it's beyond good and bad. It's beyond right and wrong. It's beyond the evaluation.
But do we
I'm not
choose?
saying you tell him this at age
No,
5.
no.
It shows me, buddy.
Well, wouldn't be the worst thing I've said. I mean, but do here goes my mind again, but, like, why do we choose yeah, we choose them because we wanted them, but why? To learn certain lessons? To
Yeah, I
get on
think
the
as
drama triangle to get off of it, eventually?
yeah, I mean, I think as spiritual people, we are always looking at how can we learn something,
Mm,
and so we choose parents who have a certain psychology that we want to overcome in this lifetime. So we get a chance to see it, and I think what we have to use it for is to see what do I have in myself that may not be exactly the same as your parents. It could actually, in some way, be the opposite, but it's in the opposite
mhm,
polarity.
mm.
And you know what does your reaction to your parents show about your psychology?
Shows a lot.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean that's you talk about how you have been on a path for a long time and looking at yourself, and that's what it's all about. You look
Mm,
at your reactions to life, and you say, what does that show about my psychology? How I look at myself? Basically, what box am I trying to fit myself into?
mhm.
Or what box am I in that causes me to react that way? And if I don't want to continue reacting this way for the rest of my life, I have to look at the box. Instead of thinking as they said in transcendental meditation, that if you just meditate 20 minutes morning and evening, you don't need to look at your psychology because one day you're going to be in cosmic consciousness. Or in the Summit Lighthouse, if you give 3 hours of violet flame degrees a day, one day you'll qualify for your ascension. You know,
Mm-mm.
or the non-duality teachers. If you just listen to this enlightened teacher and focus on this non-dual state, and you don't have to look at the dual state, the duality consciousness. You don't have to look at your psychology. This is the outer path. This is the, might say, false path that's out there that you can get into heaven or whatever the goal is without looking at your psychology.
Mm.
And it has never worked. It never will work. It's a complete fallacy. And we're just in an age now where millions of people are ready to see this, which you already saw, however many years ago when you started
Mhm,
looking at yourself.
mhm.
And many other people I met on the spiritual path, they saw this. I mean, they may not have expressed it the same way, but this is essentially what they saw. We just can't keep chasing these outer dreams. We have to look at ourselves because otherwise we're not going to change.
Yeah.
I mean, my analogy that I sometimes use is it's like an old-fashioned movie theater,
Mm,
right? And if you only focus on what's happening on the movie screen, how are you going to change the contents of the movie? You have to go to the projection room and change the film strip. I mean,
mhm.
that's the only way to change what's on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I started out pretty young on the path. I was about 18,
Mhm.
19,
Yeah.
and yeah, there was a time last year where I had this intuition that I had reached what this planet could offer me in terms of teachings, and I was calling in something more. I was walking down my road, and I even screamed it out loud. I was like, "I'm ready for more.
Mhm.
I'm ready for more beyond this world."
Yep.
And my friend Joseph found me on Instagram, a random person, stranger that I felt connected to. Just I don't normally, I have people I connect with, but it was very immediate, close, and he introduced the teachings like right then. He found it and sent it to me, and the rest is
Mhm.
history.
Yeah. That's often the way it happens with people. It's almost like we have to come to that point where we are consciously asking for more,
Hmm.
and then it happens. I mean, it can be all kinds of teachings. Again, when I was 18, I was ready for transcendental meditation. I wasn't ready for ascended master teaching, so I found what I was ready for. And then we just have to not go into this state of mind that the first thing we find is what's going to be the last thing we find.
Yeah.
Have to be open to, and that's another mistake that I see people make is you find a teaching and then you think this is the only one I should study, but it isn't. You have to be open to studying. For example, worldly psychology. There are teachings on worldly psychology that are useful for solving psychology.
Mhm.
And
I've used a lot of them. Yeah. And they're
and so have I. I've studied many different things.
internal family systems, somatic therapy has been helpful. And DBT, which dialectical behavioral therapy, is very similar to somatic work because it's been very helpful for me. They call it DBT skills, which is there's so many of them, but opposite action when you're thinking about acting on something impulsively from pattern or addiction, opposite action or changing the temperature, like hands in a cold ice water bucket or taking a cold shower, intense exercise. There's so many tools out there. That's what's so amazing because so many people are actually working with the masters and don't even know it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I was before I even knew what they were.
No, many people are. They don't necessarily need to know consciously about the masters. They don't necessarily need to find a specific teaching.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of following your intuition.
Mhm.
But for some of us, it is very helpful to realize consciously that there are ascended masters that are serving as our teachers.
Mhm. You have a webinar coming up
Yeah.
this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I read the little blurb. I know it's about the fourth ray. Can you just tell people what that is and what this conference is? And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. That's the way it usually is. I don't know what the masters are going to bring out, but the fourth ray is one of the seven main spiritual rays. It's often seen as purity, but it's really more the way of acceleration. Is the way I see it, and it is really about accelerating yourself because you were talking about how you were walking down the street, you felt like you wanted more, and you cried out, but you were ready to accelerate yourself to a higher level, and so that's basically what it's going to be about. Also, accelerating the planet to a higher level. Exactly what that means, we will only find out as it happens, but we are going to be doing what we always do at webinars, give some of the invocations and decrees together because it's more powerful when we do it together, even though we're not physically in the same room. It's still, when we're connected on the internet, it's still more powerful. And then the masters are going to give some dictations and teachings, and we'll see what they say.
Mhm.
I mean, I think in many ways, when you look at the planet, I think many people are ready for something new. People are really fed up with the wars, the COVID, this and that, and people want something better. And I think that's part of what the masters is going to give us, that impetus where people, even if they don't know about ascended masters, they can maybe get over that hump and say, I'm ready for something more.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. My mom actually wants to join me, so I'm going to really be tuning in with her, which will be interesting because
Yeah.
she, yeah, be an interesting experience.
Yeah.
I'll just maybe bring this up and then maybe we can come to a close because it's just in my head. The 10,000 of us who came into embodiment,
Mhm.
these I'm assuming are avatars, but not limited to just avatars, or there could be more avatars than 10,000. What is the 10,000 that you meant that the masters mentioned that are in embodiment?
Well, when it first started talking about it through me, they have talked about it previously, but Jesus was saying that there are 10,000 people in embodiment right now who have
Mhm.
the potential to manifest full Christhood in this lifetime. And
Yeah.
Christhood is a higher state of consciousness where you are, and you can do it universally and call it the one mind, but the masters often call it the Christ mind.
Mhm.
And it's the one that connects everything. It connects all of us, but it also connects us to our source.
Mhm.
and it was created specifically for that purpose.
Yeah.
So this means that there are 10,000 people who in past lifetimes have walked the spiritual path to reach fairly high level of consciousness. And in this lifetime, if they're willing, if they apply themselves, they can get over that hump. And then they say there are millions more who can reach a very high degree of Christhood. And
Mhm.
this is what's going to change the planet more than anything, because it's not specific outer changes that's going to save the planet or bring forth a golden age. It's the raising of consciousness. But
Mhm.
the raising of consciousness, there is a collective consciousness, right, that all people are connected to. But you can't raise the collective consciousness by working with the collective consciousness. It's not like there's this entity out there you can start working on. So
Mhm.
you raise it by people individually raising their consciousness. And because we are connected to it, it pulls up on the whole. So this is what we are meant to do. I mean, you look back at history, right? And we were given a very inadequate view of how history changes, because it's always the collective consciousness. Why are we not in the Stone Age still? Why are we not living in mud huts and
Mhm.
running around with stone tools and animal hides tied around our waist? It's because the collective consciousness has been raised, so we are open to new ideas, new ways of looking at things. Even technology is technological inventions. It's a new way of looking at things that we couldn't imagine before. And that's because the collective consciousness is raised. And that's what we are about. I mean, in a sense, I used to think that, oh, I'm here to produce certain outer changes, but I'm really just here to raise the collective consciousness.
Why is Earth so dense? Like, I know this is I don't wanna we can maybe I feel like I would love to have more conversations with you.
Yeah, yeah, we
That
can
would be
still some more
amazing
time.
because I have more questions, but it's just why Earth? Why is Earth so dense? I know there's not many of them like this in the universe, but
No, but
why?
it's what the masters call an unnatural planet, as opposed
Mhm.
to a natural planet where people haven't gone into the duality consciousness. And the duality consciousness is where you see yourself as a separate being instead of seeing yourself as connected to your higher self.
Mhm.
And when you go into this state of consciousness, all of a sudden you think that your mind can define what's right and wrong. This is where the standard came from, the duality consciousness. Uh, Whereas there is really only one, you can't even call it a standard, but there really is only one question. Is it coming from the one mind or from the separate mind? But in the separate mind, people have created this illusion there's right and wrong. And therefore, they can justify doing whatever they want to do. Look at every religion. It talks about the golden rule. Don't do unto others what you don't want them to do to you. But in the duality consciousness, you can think that it's necessary, it's justified to kill other people because they're bad people and blah, blah, blah. So that's why you have the Holocaust and the concentration camps and gas chambers and this and that. So that's why the earth is so dense, because people have for so long been in this state of consciousness where they believe they're doing the right thing. And they're not. They have defined their own standard for right and wrong. It has nothing to do with the one mind, because they are doing what is good for them, but by hurting other people. And the Earth is that way because it's one of the few planets left that is like that. So there have been life streams with a lower consciousness that have come from other planets and collected here. It's sort of in a way, the garbage dump of the galaxy. And that's why I started out saying we're here because we were stupid enough to volunteer.
No more rescuing. I'm done. I'm tired of being a rescuer.
But see, you can't actually be rescued. You can look at your psychology and overcome what caused you to come here and what causes you to feel that there's something you have to do here.
Yeah. Can just imagine me strapping on my cape and going to Earth to save the people.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Wonder Woman.
That's why we love the superhero movies. My son is obsessed with superheroes. He's just like, I am a superhero. Right.
Yeah, yeah, but that's also a very small box to put yourself in.
Yeah. Gosh, wow.
It's so enlightening.
Yeah, but again, it's just go on and on and on. But Earth wasn't always so dense. It was,
No, no, it wasn't. But
yeah,
it's
it
been
was
this way for a
once a
long time.
natural planet. It was a
Mhm.
natural planet.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
all planets are created as natural planets, basically.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna put a cap on it because we can talk about that in the next conversation. Kim, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Summer.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we can talk again some other time and see how it goes.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.